A federal employee paid by you, the taxpayer, to stop food stamp fraud just got sentenced to 2 years in prison for actively enabling a $66 million criminal scheme.
Mm-hmm.
That single act of betrayal is a powerful sign that taxpayer money is just leaking out of these critical government programs by the billions.
It's a real eye-opener because it forces us to shift our whole perspective. We're not just looking at petty individual fraud here.
Yeah.
We have to start questioning the systemic, structural vulnerabilities inside these massive federally funded programs.
Exactly. Our mission today is to give you the shortcut to understanding this crisis. We're diving deep into the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP.
Right.
We're going to expose exactly how this retailer trafficking works, profile the specific environments where this kind of fraud just explodes, and really critically examine why official government oversight seems to be failing to safeguard billions of your dollars.
And we absolutely have to start with that specific case because it's just a perfect illustration of how internal corruption can compromise the integrity of the entire system from the inside out.
Okay, let's unpack this first. We're talking about 56-year-old Arlasa Davis from Gardner, New York. She wasn't some external bad actor.
No, she was an insider.
A longtime employee of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the very agency that runs SNAP. And maybe the most egregious detail is that she worked within the department's division specifically designed to identify and stop this fraud.
So she had the keys to the kingdom, and instead of defending it, she sold them. Davis was just sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. She's also facing 2 years of supervised release after that, and she's been ordered to pay $36 million in restitution.
$36 million. And her method was just shocking in its simplicity, its brazen abuse of her position. She used her federal system's access to sell hundreds of confidential EBT license numbers to criminals.
And how did she do it?
Our sources say she used her own cell phone to just photograph handwritten lists of these confidential license numbers. And then funneled them directly to her co-conspirators.
And those license numbers were pure gold for the fraud ring. They were used to fraudulently get legitimate EBT terminals for completely unauthorized businesses. We're talking about places like smoke shops.
Places that should never be processing food stamps.
Never. This whole network generated over $66 million in unauthorized SNAP transactions.
That is $66 million stolen directly from a program meant to help vulnerable families. And it was all made possible because a government insider was selling information. The U.S. Attorney, Sean Buckley, he said that Davis exploited her role as a government employee to enrich herself.
I mean, the betrayal of public trust there is just monumental.
It is.
And while $66 million is a huge figure, here's where the perspective on the scale of the problem gets immediately political and frankly, confusing. While official agency data suggests one set of numbers for fraud, the political narrative pushes another. USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins warned that this specific case is just the tip of the spear.
Tip of the spear.
And she gave an eye-popping estimate. She believes 20 to 30% of the program's annual funding, which is around $200 billion, may be lost to fraud.
Hold on. 20 to 30%? If we take the low end of that, 20% of $200 billion, we are talking about $40 billion lost annually. Is that estimate based on the official tracking data? Or is she factoring in something else? That just seems fundamentally at odds with the typical fraud stats we see.
It's a crucial point, and it just underlines the massive uncertainty here. While a political figure might use that high estimate to underscore the threat to taxpayer funds, we have to look at the official, measurable data from the USDA's own studies.
Right, the anti-trafficking studies.
Exactly. Those focus specifically on retailer trafficking, which is just one piece of the whole fraud pie.
Okay, let's unpack those specifics then. Before we dive into the data, we really need to define what we mean by loss. We have to distinguish between intentional fraud and just simple error.
That distinction is absolutely critical. So fraud is, by definition, intentional activity. Willful misrepresentation of facts, like the trafficking we're talking about, to illegally get benefits.
And that leads to serious penalties, disqualification, even jail time.
Whereas errors are just mistakes, someone unintentionally gives incorrect info or a state agency messes up paperwork. Households often have to repay those amounts, but it isn't a crime.
Why this matters is because it's the intentional fraud, specifically retailer trafficking, that diverts billions directly into the hands of criminals.
And when we quantify that specific type of trafficking, where retailers exchange food stamps for cash, the loss is substantial. The USDA looked at data from 2015 to 2017. Using their broader definition, the trafficking rate was about 2.0% of total S&AP benefits.
A 2% rate sounds small, right? But you translate that into the sheer volume of cash flowing through this program.
The scale becomes immediate.
That 2% translates to an estimated $1.3 billion diverted annually during that period.
And while historically that percentage is lower than, say, the peak we saw back in the 90s, it's 3.8% then, the absolute dollar amount has been rising steadily.
And the rate itself is trending up again?
It is. It went from 1.5% in the 2012-2014 study up to that 2.0% in the 2015-2017 period.
So more dollars are being lost, and the percentage is ticking up. What's maybe even more alarming is the rise in the number of stores getting in on it. The percentage of stores caught violating the rules has almost doubled.
Doubled. It went from about 7.4% in the early 2000s to a very concerning 14.3% in the latest study. More stores are getting in on the act.
Which really suggests the problem is getting worse, not better.
Which raises the vital question for taxpayer vulnerability. Where exactly is this $1.3 billion in annual fraud concentrated? Because it's not evenly distributed.
And that's the real key, right? Focusing enforcement where the problem actually lives. You'd think large corporate grocery chains, those big box stores, would be where the big scams happen.
The data proves the opposite. Supermarkets and large grocery stores have incredibly low trafficking rates. We're talking less than 0.5%.
Oh, almost nothing.
Practically zero. The vast majority of the fraud, the structural weakness, is driven by smaller, less accountable businesses.
And the numbers here are stunning. Small groceries and convenience stores accounted for only about 15% of all S&MP redemptions.
15%.
Yet they were responsible for a staggering 95 to 99% of all trafficking. All of it.
It's an almost perfect concentration of fraud. It's all happening in this one specific type of retailer.
So let's drill down. What are the violation rates for these specific stores?
This is where it gets almost unbelievable. For small groceries, the estimated violation rate was 25.25%.
Wait, 1 in 4?
1 in every 4 small groceries authorized to accept food stamps was estimated to be actively trafficking benefits for cash.
Wow. And convenience stores.
Not far behind. An estimated violation rate of 16.77%.
And this ties directly to ownership, doesn't it?
It does. Contrast publicly owned stores, which have a near zero violation rate, with privately owned stores. They showed an estimated violation rate from 17.5% all the way up to 19.3%. When accountability is looser, fraud just skyrockets.
And if we connect this to demographics, we see why this fraud thrives. It concentrates in areas where economic need is the highest.
Exactly.
In neighborhoods where more than 30% of households live in poverty, the trafficking rate for stores in those locations hit 22.3%.
And that's why these small private stores become the center of the crime. Stores in the very highest poverty areas accounted for up to 36% of the total dollar amount trafficked nationally. They are specifically targeting communities where people are desperate,
offering cash for benefits and skimming taxpayer dollars in the process. We also can't ignore the growth factor here. The study noted the number of authorized convenience stores, a key high-risk group, grew by over 15% between the study periods.
And that's a direct cause and effect loop. If you allow the population of these high-risk, low-accountability retailers to grow by 15%,
you're just going to get more fraud.
You inevitably increase the total amount of benefits being diverted. The government is essentially authorizing more high-risk access points without strengthening any of the oversight.
So we have overwhelming evidence. Billions stolen through corruption and fraud, all concentrated in small, private stores in high-poverty areas. Which leads us to the critical final point, accountability. What role does the federal agency play in letting this happen?
The accountability deficit at the Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS, is maybe the most serious structural flaw we found. The USDA Office of Inspector General, the OIG, published a major audit in May 2025. And their findings are, frankly, damning.
The OIG found that FNS has completely failed to manage risk strategically. They haven't comprehensively assessed S&A fraud risks using the GAO's fraud risk management framework since 2015.
Since 2015. Think about that. The GAO framework is like the government's standard security checklist for a multi-billion-dollar program.
And they just ignored it.
For almost a decade, FNS's approach to managing fraud was described as ad hoc. They lacked a documented anti-fraud strategy. They didn't even have a comprehensive fraud risk profile. The OIG found FNS failed to assign clear responsibilities to any dedicated anti-fraud entity.
A massive gap in program integrity, right at the top. And we can actually measure the cost of that failure in real time, can't we?
Oh, absolutely. We're seeing a massive new challenge with external scams like EBT card skimming schemes.
Right.
FNS reported replacing more than $220.1 million in stolen benefits with federal funds for just fiscal years 2023 and 2024 alone.
$220 million in 2 years. That's money they're paying out after the theft has already happened. It's the definition of a reactive pay-and-chase model.
Which is precisely what the GAO framework is designed to prevent.
Taxpayers foot the bill, and then the agency tries to recover the funds. It's a systemic failure.
And that failure is why you're seeing policy experts in Congress demanding rigorous safeguards. The solutions focus on 3 things: stringent oversight, improved monitoring, and robust enforcement targeted at those high-risk retailers.
And crucially, the discussion on reform also has to look at reducing overall program spending and ensuring benefits only go to those who are truly eligible. So that means strengthening work requirements, closing eligibility loopholes.
But the potential impact of those kinds of reforms is enormous. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that just implementing strengthened work requirements could result in federal savings of $109 billion over 10 years.
$109 billion.
So reform is multifaceted. It's about catching criminals, yes, but it's also about making the program fiscally responsible.
It's about accountability for the taxpayer dollar, restoring integrity from the inside by rooting out corruption, like Arlasa Davis, and from the outside by making sure FNS actually does its job.
Exactly. Stricter eligibility and robust anti-fraud enforcement work together to stop these programs from being a leaky bucket.
So what does this all mean for you? We started this deep dive with the shocking case of Arlasa Davis, a corrupt federal employee who enabled a $66 million theft.
Then we learned that annually, over $1.3 billion is routinely diverted through retailer trafficking, a problem that's highly concentrated in a small percentage of high-risk private stores.
The core takeaway is that the integrity of these massive federal programs rests entirely on the government's commitment to internal controls. When agencies like FNS fail for nearly a decade to implement basic strategic fraud risk frameworks,
which the GAO provided as leading practices,
they create a huge structural weakness that transfers billions of your dollars directly into the hands of criminals.
It's a systemic failure built on documented government incompetence. We have the data showing where the money's lost, and we have audits showing the agency responsible was operating without the most basic defense plan.
Now consider this final provocative thought. If the USDA was found by its own Inspector General to lack a formalized anti-fraud strategy for years, creating an environment where a $66 million internal corruption ring could thrive.
And external skimming costs hundreds of millions.
How many more vast federal programs overseeing hundreds of billions of dollars are currently operating blind and inviting similar fraud right now? The price of lax oversight isn't just bureaucratic inefficiency, it's billions in lost public funds and a wholesale betrayal of public trust.